Welcome back to Dialogue on Public Issues. I'm John Chowning with Campbellsville University. I'm pleased today to be hosting the Reverend Dr. Philip Suber, pastor of First Baptist Church of Elkton, Kentucky. Dr. Suber, welcome.
Thank you.
It's so good to have you on campus.
Glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Philip L. Suber. I'm from Kansas City, Missouri. Joined the military, spent 7 years in the Army, did some time in Somalia, left the Army in '95, married a woman from Clarksville, Tennessee.
All right.
And that's the end of the story.
Now, you have kind of a dual career. Might call you bivocational
Yes.
as a minister.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, I work for the Department of Children's Services in Clarksville, Tennessee. I work for the state of Tennessee, and so I work as a team leader in the foster care program. My primary focus is reunification or permanence for children, and permanence would be return to parent, exit custody, live with relative, worst case scenario, termination of parental rights, and we bring the children into full guardianship and hopefully get them adopted to a family.
Do you find that that kind of work is compatible and maybe even complementary to your work as a pastor in the church?
Yes. It is ministry, as you stated. It is ministry.
Yes, it is. Yeah, very much so. Now, every pastor and preacher that I've ever met has a unique and personal call from God. Share with us about how God called you.
God called me in 1997 is when I really recognized the call. And it was, we were at church, we were praying, and there was what I call an out-of-body experience where I was transformed to the pulpit while my uncle was praying, and the Lord said to me specifically, "I've called you to preach." I refused to answer that call, and it occurred one day. I was downtown. The call of the Lord came on me so that I could not fight it, and I walked from downtown Clarksville to Short A Street in Clarksville, Tennessee, to my pastor's house to tell him that I'd been called to preach.
Was that a very long period of time in between those two experiences, or fairly close?
Maybe several months, no, a couple of months between, because I went to him twice, and he denied me twice. But the third time that I went, he opened up his home door. He said, "Come on in." I already knew. I just couldn't tell you. So.
Yeah. So a fairly dramatic a call
for me,
your case.
For me, yes.
Yeah. So everyone's call's different.
Yes.
Now, how long have you been at First Baptist in Elkton?
19 years. 19 years.
Tell us about First Baptist.
First Baptist is a rural church, small church, agricultural in a sense, very loving church. Initially, the church was more inward as it relates to things that we were more church work oriented, and we have now transitioned to be more community oriented in our work, and so we're in transition even now as we have lost many strong members through death, and we are transitioning and focusing on church growth now and reclaiming some of that middle-aged group that's there that's not attending on a regular basis. But for the most part, First Baptist is a loving church.
Right.
Yes.
I had a guest a week or two ago here on campus who centers his work on healthy churches and working on church revitalization all over the country. And I asked him what is the key to a healthy church. And he said just what you said. The key to a healthy church, put aside all the models, all the books and so forth, the key to a healthy church is love.
Yes.
And he quoted the great commandment, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
I believe that, yes.
And a lot of churches we see are not healthy because they're not loving.
Sad.
And that seems to be an oxymoron, if that's the right term, but kind of contradictory of sort. But there's some churches out there that are just plain cold.
Yes, sir.
And I'm sure you've experienced those just as have I. Now, what are some of the ministries that you're doing there at First Baptist?
Well, First Baptist, we have our youth ministry, our Bible study, that's on Wednesdays. On the third Sunday, first and third Sunday, we have an AMP ministry, and that's our youth ministry. We struggle sometimes getting our youth church on Wednesdays because of sports and things of that nature. And so we share some time on Sunday, first and third Sunday, for our AMP team to take them to the fellowship hall and train them in different areas of life and Bible understanding. We also have a COC ministry, Community Outreach Committee. That particular ministry is the vehicle by which we are doing our outreach, our community work. And we had planned to launch our, we're working to teach people Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint. We plan to launch that this year, but we had some setbacks, and so we've revamped, and we will launch that January. And so we're really focusing on outreach. We have sponsored a family for Thanksgiving this year. We've sponsored another family, well, the same family. We've helped with some clothing and things of that nature. We've joined the Chamber of Commerce, and so we're really working to make an impact, a positive impact on the community.
Now, in looking at your church's Facebook site, I noticed a couple of words that caught my attention, a couple of phrases: community empowerment,
Yes.
and empowering people.
Yes.
And you've touched on that, but I'd like to hear kind of an explanation of that and how you're doing that, and how that relates back to the core mission of the church.
Well, before we can save someone spiritually, we have to help them physically. And so if a person can't work, then we can't really help them see Christ. But if we can empower them with a skill set so that they can be employed, then we have their ear because we've helped them physically. We can then begin to work on them spiritually and lead them to Christ. And so that's the empowerment piece that's most important. If a person can't pay their bills, they just can't see Jesus. If they're hungry, you can't tell them about Jesus. But if you don't give them a fish, but teach them how to fish,
right,
and they can feed themselves every day, then they'll be more willing to sit down and talk to you about their soul salvation.
Seems to me that's sort of the biblical model.
That is.
The New Testament model
Yes,
in
sir.
particular.
Yes, sir.
Jesus didn't do a lot of preaching. He did some teaching, and he did some preaching, but he spent most of his time in ministry. And he brought people to salvation, but he did a lot of healing.
Yes, sir.
And a lot of feeding, and a lot of sharing,
Yes.
and a lot of accepting.
Yes.
He dared to eat with the tax collectors and the senators of the day.
Yes. The rebel.
Yeah, yeah. And it seems there might be an example in there for us in the church today. Now, you're also serving as a vice moderator, one of the vice moderators, the General Association of Baptists in Kentucky.
Yes.
Now, tell us about the General Association.
The General Association of Baptists in Kentucky is an awesome association. That has three objectives: Simmons College, American Baptist Newspaper, and the Mission House. And so we work to support Simmons, the paper, as well as the Mission House. But the Mission House has been torn down, and so we're revamping that area there. And so the association, I believe, is very important to the churches and to the people, as well as the community, for what we offer. We are working through Moderator Creighton's leadership to revamp some of the presentations and the Association of Pastors Conference to make it more viable, more marketable, more relevant to today's time. But I believe the primary focus is to empower churches, empower pastors, so that they can go back and work in their respective areas to bring glory to the Lord and for kingdom work.
It's the historic Black Baptist,
Yes.
predominantly Black African-American Baptist.
That's correct.
Although not everybody is.
Not everybody.
But principally, historically.
Yes, sir.
Black Baptist, just so the folks in the audience might understand, our church is a member.
That's
and
correct.
I personally participate and have been accepted into the fellowship, and consider it a great honor and humbling experience to be a part of the General Association.
Yes, sir. And you bring a lot to the table, and we thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, in terms of your work with the state of Tennessee in the Department of Children's Advocacy, what are some of the things that you're witnessing? I don't mean specific cases, obviously, but just in general, what is the condition and the challenges facing our children in our culture today?
Families are facing, one, poverty, two, opioid addiction, heroin addiction, and amphetamine, to include mental health challenges. And so we have families self-medicating, trying to cope with their challenges, but not taking care of their mental health piece, and so put their children at risk. And so that's what we really face. And then on the other side of the coin is we don't have enough resources to really address some of the current concerns that we have.
Is your goal generally to preserve the family where you can?
That is the primary goal. The primary goal of the department is to reunify with the parent if we can. However, if that parent does not meet criteria or expectation, if the parent does not make progress on their plan of services, then we have to look at another alternative. And so we run concurrent goals. So one goal on our permanency plan will be return to parent. The other goal could read exit custody, live with relative. And so we're working both goals at the same time. And so if the parent happens to fail, then we have this other alternative with the relative. And so the child still would exit custody to someone that they know, to their same community, and it's reduces trauma, releases the child from state's custody, and they can go on and be successful.
Is there great need, here in Kentucky, there's a need for foster parents and foster homes. Is that a great need in Tennessee as well?
It is. It is primarily for African American males, teenage males and females. We have to place our teenagers, African American males, females, out of county. Sometimes we have to place them 2 hours away, 3 hours away, and that's challenging on the family as well as the workers.
In the case of Clarksville, would that be to Memphis or to Nashville? Most likely
Nashville, Murfreesboro, Cookeville, sometimes Memphis, Jackson. So it's it can be a distance.
That would seem to me that would be very traumatic for the child or young person.
Very.
Now, your congregation, listening to you, your congregation seems to be increasingly engaged in the community.
Yes.
Outside the four walls.
Yes.
And why do you think that's so important in 2019 and going into 2020 and beyond?
I do believe that that's the model that Christ gave us. And the church must go out to the people in order to share Christ. And we must be around the people to determine their need so that we can create a plan of action to assist them. I think Ezekiel 37 is a good text to kind of look at, because when God set Ezekiel down in the midst of a valley of dry bones, he had him walk around the bones. So he had to take an observation. He had to look and assess to see what, the condition of the need. And then God put the plan in place of how he would fix it. He told Ezekiel to prophesy to the bones and then prophesy to the wind. And that is the same with us. We have to be in the community to address the need, to assess the need, and then as a team create different ways that we can help where we can with our skill sets and tools, and then partner with other churches or other community agencies to meet the needs as well.
Are you seeing signs of revived engagement on the part of the church beyond the four walls? Is there a rekindling of interest in that realm, do you think? Really?
Yes, I do believe through the COC committee, our Community Outreach Committee, that vehicle drove the birth, the interest that we're now seeing. It's heightened the interest. And so some people can't see vision because it's not visible. It's in writing, it's spoken, but it's not visible. And when they see tangible pieces of the vision coming into fruition, it is then they have that epiphany. Aha! Now I understand, and they get on board. And so that's what's happening with us now.
What do you think is the biggest challenge facing the church today?
First Baptist, or just the church
in general?
Oh. I believe there is an apostasy occurring within the church, primarily with the younger generation. They're leaving, I believe, what we would call denominations or organized religion, and they're seeking other opportunities or other entities to be a part of. And how do we regain them and maintain them and continue to church them or disciple them is a great challenge for the church.
Is a part of that apostasy kind of a spirituality, a pursuit of spirituality, but one that is just everything's relative, or believe in something? As long as you believe in something, it's okay.
Yes, I believe so. And then people want to live their life the way they want to live it, and they don't want anybody to put any restrictions on them.
Right.
And so when it comes to Christianity and the Bible, there are restrictions that are put in place that we have to uphold, honor, refrain from in order to bring glory to God. And some people just don't want to adjust their lives.
And everything that we see identified as Christian
is not.
Is not.
No.
I tell our folks at our church, we have to be discerning. We have to seek the Holy Spirit's discernment.
Yes.
And use the gift of discernment. And some of the stuff we see under the banner or under the label is a better word, Christian.
It's not.
Because even on television or on the internet, there's a lot of stuff that's false.
I agree. And I challenge the church, the people that I serve, to read the text, study the Bible, check behind me. Don't believe everything that I say.
Right.
Don't take it as heart. It's not my goal to mislead them.
Right.
However, I'm human.
Exactly.
I'm subject to error, but I want them to check behind me, and that will create a habit of checking behind everyone that preaches to them to ensure that they're telling them the truth.
We live in a culture of 30-second sound bites, in some cases even less.
Yes.
Simple surface answers on the issues of the day, and we carry that into the church, it seems. Would you agree?
I would agree.
Do you contend in your area with some people who are looking for entertainment in the church rather than worship and substance? Is that an issue in some places, do you think?
I believe that's an issue in some places. I believe that that is an issue with some people in every church. Again, worship is not what we get out of it, it's what we bring to it. And worship is not about the song, how well the person sings, or how well the preacher preaches. When we worship, are we giving our all to the Lord? And as we listen to the message, are we listening for the message that the Lord has for us, opposed to critiquing, whatever aspect of the message they may critique. And the other challenge I see is the competitiveness of churches and the competitiveness of pastors and preachers. Who preaches the best, who has the most members, who has the largest financial statement, and who has the most buses. That doesn't matter with the Lord. He wants our obedience, he wants our faithfulness. And everybody is not going to pastor 1,000 people. Some people will pastor 10. But if God calls one to pastor, be honored that he called you to pastor.
Size should not be an excuse, it seems to me, to do church on an inferior basis.
No, sir.
In other words, size is not an excuse for inferiority.
No, sir. Excellence.
We should pursue excellence.
Excellence.
In service to Christ, regardless of the size.
Yes, sir.
And we can do it well, regardless of the size.
Yes, sir. I agree.
And I think our smaller churches have suffered from self-inflicted inferiority complexes. We've kind of inflicted it on ourselves. I haven't written a book on that or conducted any research on that, but I've seen so many smaller churches just suffering and even dying in some cases because, well, we're too small, we can't do that. And, well, there may be some things we can't do, but there are a lot of things that church can do that the megachurch won't do or can't do. There's a quality of ministry and fellowship that the megachurch will never have.
That's correct.
That smaller church or medium-sized church has, if they will only engage in it.
I think what changed, what helped me, I read, I want to say it's Tom Rainer's book, Simple Church. It may not be. That simple church really helped reframe my thinking about church and simplify everything we do.
Yeah.
Just make it simple. And we don't have to do 1,000 things.
Right.
If we do 4 or 5 different ministries, let's make it simple, but let's do it in the spirit of excellence.
Amen. Amen. My wife and I were traveling somewhere just a few days ago and talking about some new work here in town, here in Campbellsville, some new faith-based missions, very good stuff. But we commented that our church we really don't feel a call to be involved in that particular work because we're already involved. We started naming the stuff we're already involved in. And again, you can only do well so much. And you can spread yourselves. There's extremes. Some people try to do too much, and some people don't want to do anything. So there's a balance, I think, to be pursued in church life as well.
Yes, sir.
Now, what are some of the major challenges in the culture as a whole? And we've touched on them, but I want to focus on those from a pastor's perspective. The major cultural challenges we're facing today in general, and then specifically as a pastor, how do we address those? How does the church approach those challenges? How do we address them? I mean, what comes to mind? And I know we could spend hours and days dealing with that.
For the area that I'm in, the challenge that I have is the younger generation just not being present for worship, not being present for Bible study, and their focus is on athletics because they want to become the next big star so that they can move their families into a better position socially, financially and things of that nature. And so it seems that they, as well as their parents, have put church, God on the back burner. So how do we redirect? How do we regain interest? One of the things that we're working on for 2020 is incorporating technology into our worship. One of the things that I do once a month is to tell the youth to take out their phones and do a church selfie. And I try to train them that you can have fun attending church, and church is not all day. Right. It's just a couple hours out of your day. Those are the things that I'm doing at this point to try in an attempt to get the young folk engaged, building relationships. One of the things I try to do is go to, if I can, some of the games, things of that nature, to let them know I'm concerned about what you're doing in the community. Right. Now, in turn, come on and share with us at the church so that we can have a good partnership. Yeah,
I think those are good thoughts. And one thing we've done at our church is associate pastor just creatively one day said, take out your phone and text someone right now and tell them you're praying for them and invite them to church.
Wow.
Real simple.
Yes.
At the beginning of the service. And he's done a couple of things similar to that during children's time. And those are, like you said, taking a selfie. He hadn't done that, but that's a good idea. I may pass that on to him. And I did at last year's pastors conference at the General Association. I participated in the lecture series.
Yes, sir, you did.
On the generational divide on technology. And one of the things I pointed out in the research I did in preparation for that was the difference in the attention span of my generation and Generation Z.
Yes.
And that Generation Z has the average attention span of something like some researchers say, and I'm not saying this is absolutely accurate, but like 8 seconds.
Yes, sir.
Which is less than that of a goldfish. Not that I'm comparing our kids to a goldfish.
I follow you.
But the point is made. So how do we articulate the gospel? How do we make the gospel relevant to that generation and with that reality? So I'm not lamenting. I'm not fussing at the generation. It's just fact.
Follow you.
And we as pastors need to understand the cultural framework that we're
Yes.
dealing with.
That's right. And so the transition to technology really was birthed from that lecture series that intergenerational
Yes, from the Jetsons
to the Flintstones to the Jetsons.
Flintstones to the Jetsons.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so from the 3 lectures that I received that week, provided me a framework to transition for our young people to work to get them back involved. So I really appreciate your work.
Well, I learned a lot just in preparing for the lecture, and the other 2 gentlemen that provided lectures as well during that week. It was a great experience for me.
Yes.
Now, we're down to just 2 or 3 minutes in closing. We live in a time that people are increasingly divided. Tensions are increasing in our culture. Tensions seem to be back on the surface between races and different groups. What's the role of the church in addressing these issues as we're entering into Thanksgiving and Christmas season? We're getting ready to start a new decade. What's the role of the church in bringing people together?
Reconciliation.
Yes.
Reconciliation.
Yeah.
We have to do that through love.
Mm.
We have to be patient. 1 Corinthians chapter 13.
Yeah.
That's it in a nutshell. And Paul wrote that piece really to teach Christians how they should interact with one another. You know, a lot of pastors use that for marriage,
Right.
but it's really meant for application of Christians with one another, and even with those who don't agree with us.
Sure.
And when we operate in that venue, when we operate in that framework, we can reduce a lot of this friction, agitation, anger, and really build relationships where we can have discussions to get to know each other, because that's the problem. We just don't know it.
And it really has to start among God's people.
It must.
Absolutely.
It must.
If we don't get along,
Then
how can we
expect the world to follow us?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Reverend Philip Suber, we're out of time, my friend. Thank you for taking time to do this show and for traveling from Clarksville, Tennessee to Kentucky and sharing that powerful message on being thankful.
Thank you.
God bless you.
God bless you too, brother.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir. This is John Chowning with Reverend Philip Suber, pastor of First Baptist Church, Elkton, Kentucky, and third vice moderator of the General Association of Baptists in Kentucky, and thanking our viewers for being with us for dialogue on public issues.